A mountain of debt, the looming crisis. The US government is about to make a colossal mistake. They're on the verge of passing a $4.5 trillion bill. This bill is essentially a massive tax cut. And guess what? It's primarily benefiting the wealthy. This reckless spending spree will explode our national debt. We're talking about adding trillions to an already staggering figure. It's like taking out a second mortgage on your house to buy a solid gold jet ski. You don't need it, and you can't afford it. This irresponsible financial decision will have dire consequences for generations to come. Interest payments will skyrocket, crowding out essential government programs. Think education, infrastructure, and, you guessed it, social safety nets for the most vulnerable. We're playing a dangerous game with our nation's future. It's time to wake up and realize the gravity of this situation. Dissecting the $4.5 trillion behemoth, let's break down this monstrous bill. The bulk of it, a whopping $3.4 trillion, goes straight into the pockets of individuals through lower income tax rates. Sounds good, right? Hold on, when you look closer, you realize it's a classic case of the rich getting richer. These tax cuts disproportionately benefit the wealthy, leaving crumbs for the working class. Then there's the $780 billion pass-through deduction, a boon for businesses and investors. And let's not forget the $630 billion from the repeal of the alternative minimum tax, another gift to the affluent. It's a blatant transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top. This bill isn't about stimulating the economy, it's about lining the pockets of the already wealthy. The Republican divide, a House divided. Even within the Republican Party there's a rift. Some, like House Budget Committee Chair Jody Arrington, are pushing for spending cuts to offset the massive tax cuts. Others, like Senator Mike Crapo, believe tax cuts will magically pay for themselves through economic growth. It's a classic case of we'll figure out the details later. The problem is, those details involve slashing essential programs that millions of Americans rely on. This internal struggle highlights the irresponsible nature of this bill. They're so focused on pushing through these tax cuts that they haven't even figured out how to pay for them without hurting the most vulnerable. It's like ordering a 5-course meal without checking your bank balance first. Spoiler alert, you're probably going to have to wash dishes for a month to pay it off. Squeezing the needy proposed cuts and their victims. So, how do they plan to pay for this $4.5 trillion extravaganza? By taking from those who can least afford it, of course. We're talking about deep cuts to programs like Medicaid, food stamps, and green energy initiatives. Medicaid, a lifeline for millions of low-income Americans, is on the chopping block. This means less access to healthcare, more people skipping essential treatments, and families drowning in medical debt. Food stamp benefits, already barely enough to survive on, face further reductions. Imagine being forced to choose between feeding your children and paying rent. This is the reality for millions of Americans struggling to put food on the table. And don't even get me started on the gutting of green energy programs. This short-sighted move not only harms our environment but also eliminates potential job opportunities in a burgeoning sector. These cuts aren't just bad policy, they're morally reprehensible. They're a direct attack on the most vulnerable members of our society. Section 5. The Medicaid Massacre, Healthcare on the Chopping Block. Let's talk about Medicaid. It's a lifeline for over 80 million Americans, providing access to healthcare for low-income families, children, seniors, and people with disabilities. The proposed cuts to Medicaid are staggering. We're talking about billions of dollars slashed from a program that's already stretched thin. This means millions of Americans will lose their health insurance, forcing them to choose between their health and putting food on the table. Imagine being a single mother working 2 jobs and still struggling to make ends meet. Now imagine losing your child's health insurance because of these heartless cuts. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about real people's lives. It's about denying essential health care to those who need it most. It's a moral stain on our nation. Section 6. Empty plates, food stamps under fire. Now let's move on to another casualty in this fiscal bloodbath. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, better known as food stamps. This program provides essential food assistance to over 40 million Americans struggling with food insecurity. The proposed cuts to SNAP are a disgrace. We're talking about taking food out of the mouths of hungry children, seniors living on fixed incomes, and working families struggling to survive. Imagine being a child going to bed hungry because your parents can't afford to put food on the table. Imagine being an elderly person relying on food banks to supplement your meager income. These cuts aren't just cruel, they're counterproductive. They lead to increased healthcare costs, decreased productivity, and a cycle of poverty that's difficult to break. Food is a basic human right, not a privilege. Denying people access to nutritious food is inhumane and shameful. Section 7. A bleak future. The domino effect on low-income communities. These cuts to essential programs like Medicaid and SNAP will have a devastating domino effect on low-income communities. Reduced access to healthcare means more people delaying or foregoing essential medical care, leading to more severe health problems down the line. This, in turn, leads to higher healthcare costs for everyone and a less healthy workforce. Cutting food assistance programs will increase hunger and food insecurity, leading to developmental problems in children, chronic health conditions, and decreased productivity. These cuts will exacerbate existing inequalities, pushing more families into poverty and creating a cycle of despair that's difficult to escape. It's a bleak future for those already struggling to make ends meet. Section 8. The widening gap, economic inequality on steroids. This $4.5 trillion tax cut bill, coupled with the proposed cuts to social safety net programs, is a recipe for disaster. It will further widen the already gaping chasm between the rich and the poor. The wealthy will reap the benefits of these tax cuts, further padding their already overflowing bank accounts. Meanwhile, the poor and middle class will bear the brunt of the cuts to essential programs, pushing them further into poverty. This isn't just about economics, it's about fairness and justice. It's about creating a society where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background or circumstances. This bill is a blatant attack on the American dream, turning it into a cruel joke for those struggling to make ends meet. Section 9. A call to action. Our future hangs in the balance. We are at a crossroads. The decisions we make today will have far-reaching consequences for generations to come. We can choose to continue down this path of reckless spending and disregard for the most vulnerable, or we can choose a different path. We need to demand better from our elected officials. We need to hold them accountable for their actions and demand policies that benefit all Americans, not just the wealthy few. Call your representatives, write to your senators, make your voice heard. The future of our nation, our communities, and our families depends on it. This isn't just about politics, it's about our shared humanity. It's about creating a just and equitable society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. The time for action is now. Let's not let this opportunity slip away.